have this uncanny experience when you're talking to these chatbots. Every single answer makes total sense, but there's somehow this feeling that every time you ask it a question, a different person is answering you.
It's not easy to understand what this means without trying it out. So I decided to have a chat with one of these chatbots myself. I chose one called Cleverbot, a chatbot invented by the British AI developer Rollo Carpenter, which took part in that same Turing test in Brighton 6 years ago. Should we fear artificial intelligence?
No, only the idea of an artificial intelligence.
What if computers become more powerful than humans?
Then this would be much more interesting.
In what way?
You can collect wood by punching, build house, mine iron and craft iron, fighting with monsters, building.
That answer did not make sense.
It may not make sense to you, but that doesn't always mean it doesn't make sense.
I don't think that you really are that clever.
Same here.
Pretty cheeky.
That is cheeky. Yeah, that's a perfect illustration, actually, of what I was just describing, where each answer makes a kind of local sense. The place, though, as you note, of course, where Cleverbot fell flat on its face, was the follow-up question, right? It's really treating each Q&A as completely independent atomic thing.
In other words, although these chatbots have learnt a lot from the conversations they've had with humans, they can't yet converse sequentially in the way that humans do. So let's pause for a moment. We've been told about some of the dangers that super-intelligent machines might pose. And we've heard that some question whether machines will reach human intelligence at all. But there's a third group of people. Those who say that not only will computers match human intelligence, but that we need them to for the good of humanity. I'm going to introduce you to one of those people. But before that, here's his first piece of evidence. It's from a groundbreaking broadcast of a game show 4 years ago.
This is Jeopardy! The IBM Challenge. Here are today's contestants. From Los Angeles, California, Brad Rutter. An IBM computer system able to rapidly understand and analyze natural language, Watson.
In 2011, the long-running game show in America, Jeopardy, pitted two former winners against an IBM computer called Watson. It was, perhaps, an unfair match. Watson, with its 2,880 core processors in 90 servers, 16 terabytes of data and 80 teraflops, that's 80 trillion logical operations per second. But it was, after all, just a computer.
Now the last clue. Even a broken one of these on your wall is right twice a day. Watson.
What is clock?
Clock is correct. And with that, you move up to 23,000.
Watson answered question after question correctly, beating the two human contestants by some margin. It was the most successful public display so far of the ability of computers to process natural language.
I'm Neil Jacobstein. I'm co-chair of Artificial Intelligence and Robotics at Singularity University on the NASA Research Park campus in Mountain View, California.
You may not have heard of Singularity University. It aims to explore ways of using technology to solve some of the world's greatest problems. Here's the little goal the faculty sets their students.
What we challenge them to do is to have a positive impact on at least 1 billion people within 10 years.
Neil Jacobstein sees what happened on the game show as an important marker in the future of AI.
We've already seen examples of Watson being able to deal with double entendre and be able to deal with puns and get the right answer, make the right inferences.
But, as we heard from Brian Christian, it's much easier for computers to do a bit of Q&A. Surely the real test is a computer being able to converse like we do, with subtlety and humour.
I think that emotional intelligence and humour and subtlety will be the last frontier of emulating human intelligence, and it will take quite a long time. the way to think about that is probabilistically. So you could say that a artificial intelligence that has something like human capabilities might have a greater than 50% chance of arriving by 2030, thereabouts, and a higher likelihood by 2040, and an even higher likelihood after that.
We spoke to Professor Margaret Bowden, who you may know
Yes.
of. She thinks it's very unlikely that machines will ever be able to match human intelligence in a generalised way, with all its sort of subtleties of language and understanding humour and interpretation.
Well, I know Margaret and I like her, I respect her, but I think that we will, in fact, be able to emulate most aspects of the brain, if not all, and I think we can build mechanisms that use similar principles, but we don't have to completely mimic the way the brain does its processing. And I think we'll come to understand the brain over time in a way that is systematic.
Given the difference in opinion here, how do we move on with the question we're trying to answer, whether we should fear artificial intelligence? Well, since Professor Bowden says you can't rule out the possibility of it happening, then we'll carry on the understanding that it is at least possible that one day machines will become as intelligent as us. What then?
That could be a very good thing, because our brains haven't had a major upgrade for over 50,000 years, and they evolved under very different selection pressures than the ones that we see today. We now have torrents of information coming at us, terabits of information. We have major challenges ahead, and I think that we would benefit greatly from having our brains be augmented by artificial intelligence in a variety of ways.
Sir Neil Jacobstein says we shouldn't fear artificial intelligence. Rather, we need AI. But what about the problems outlined by Professor Nick Bostrom? That example of the diligent robot replacing the human race with paperclips, turning the world into a giant stationery cupboard.
We owe it to ourselves to build systems that don't have the characteristic that they can just go off half-cocked like that. I think that we need to build systems that have external monitoring so that we're using AI to monitor AI.
Using AI to monitor AI. That might not satisfy everyone. Who monitors the AI that's monitoring the AI?
The idea that this is just a coding issue and technology can deal with it on its own, that strikes me as implausible.
This is Ryan Calo. He's a law professor at the University of Washington in Seattle. Someone who was passionate about robots as a boy, and as a man gave evidence on AI to the US Senate's Judiciary Committee. So does he think we should fear artificial intelligence?
I think we should. I don't think we should fear it in the same way as we might fear a monster in the sense of being out to get us. Rather, as we begin to commit more and more to artificial intelligence, and as it gets more unpredictable, then we should be concerned. It's reasonable to fear all the way up to the idea of fearing for humanity itself.
Professor Calo is one of those leading the call for the US government to start looking into the legal issues around AI. He says mistakes are already being made.
So Nevada a few years ago passed a law explaining how driverless cars would go in the state of Nevada. And as far as I know, it's the first state law to define in a statute the term artificial intelligence. So they define artificial intelligence as any time that the computer substitutes for what the driver would do.
Professor Calo and his colleagues spotted a problem with that definition of AI.
A bunch of us looked at it and observed, well, that's not a good definition of artificial intelligence in the driving context, because cars are constantly doing things that the driver used to do, right? I mean, even anti-lock brakes, when you hit the brakes, you are basically suggesting to the vehicle that it slow down, and it thinks about it, okay, yeah, I guess I can, and then maybe it does or it doesn't.
So legislators in Nevada did what no legislators like having to do.
They had to repeal the definition of artificial intelligence and write a new one. And so just to dramatize this for you, that means that the first time that a state body, a legislative body, defined artificial intelligence was also the first time it made a mistake in defining artificial intelligence.
This is not a good position to be in. The law playing catch-up to AI developers who are racing ahead. Most of us are only just beginning to learn about what the risks are. And at a certain point, we won't be able to do what the fisherman in the story did and undo what we've wished for.
I do think that we are committing a tremendous amount of our lives to machines. And so I do believe that the time is right now to be thinking through the legal and policy aspects of this technology.
For Professor Nick Bostrom, it's all about numbers. These numbers.
There are a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to make machines more intelligent. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people around the world are working, contributing in different ways to this. But there might only be like half a dozen or a dozen people at the moment who are actually working on the control problem. That's not in proportion with how important the problem actually is.
But if we do allocate enough resources to the control problem, Neil Jacobstein says that AI